Evening everybody, and welcome to the Police Crime Commissioner election hustings for Boscombe. Yeah, we've got all our candidates here to answer questions this evening. Those in the know, this the first election for Police Crime Commissioner was in November 2012, and we're brought in to replace the now abolished police authorities. So the core functions are to hold the Chief Constable to account for delivery of police and crime, hold the police fund, and they're responsible for the appointment, suspension, dismissal of the Chief Constable. So yeah, it's quite a tall order, quite a lot of demanding job, and we're going to find out tonight who's up to the task, and find out some of their views on what they can do in the position if they get elected. So to go over the candidates, they're going to come and introduce themselves. And this evening we have Martyn Underhill, who's the independent candidate, Patric Canavan, who's our Labour, for Labour, Lester Taylor for UKIP, and Conservatives Andrew Graham. So the format for the evening is basically going to do the introductions. They're just limited to 60 seconds for the introductions. And then we have been fielding questions from the public now for the last couple of weeks by email and social media. And the themes that have come out of that, those email responses, as a steering group on Monday, forum steering group, we then have put together 6 of the kind of key issues we've identified from those emails from the general public. And because we're quite tight on time, watch it, we're in Boston, no. So that's going to be the first half of the evening. Is going to be around those questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each of those questions. As we go through, the order of the candidates will be randomised, or it'll be different, so that people aren't following each other or beginning and starting each time. And then the second half of the night will be open questions from the floor. So hopefully we'll get a bit of a flavour for each candidate from all those questions at the beginning, and then you'll be able to ask from the floor specific candidates specific questions. And again, there won't be lots of banter around that, so keep your questions for a candidate, and then yeah, that should be that. And we'll just have closing remarks at the end of the evening for each of the candidates, just to see their, where they stand, and send you off with an idea of what to do in the elections. So without further ado, we're going to get each of the individuals up and have them introduce themselves for 60 seconds. So let's start with the incumbent, Martyn Underhill.
Good evening. Are we starting? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to this forum. I'm honoured to have been your PCC in the last term. I said I'd keep party politics out of policing, and I believe that I have. I said I'd work with you to help the voluntary sector and fund the voluntary sector, and I have. And I said I'd resist privatisation and the outsourcing of policing, which I have. I said I'd work for Boscombe, and I believe that I have. I've worked with many of you in this room. We've done initiatives for sex workers, we've done initiatives for housing, we've done initiatives for policing and antisocial behaviour. We put a second inspector into the police station at Boscombe, and we have a new police hub. I promised to bring policing closer to the community, and you will have seen that open a few weeks later. More generally, I saved the Marine section in this town. I opened the second Victims Bureau only in the UK, and I commissioned the first ever Victims contract. I ring-fenced PCSOs for the whole of Dorset, and I entered the first ever PCC-led strategic alliance with Devon and Cornwall. I believe I'm working for you, I believe I'm your voice, and I look forward to representing you again. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name's Patric. I'm the Labour and Cooperative Party candidate in this election. I'm standing because I want to stand up for Dorset against the government cuts to the police, because cuts have consequences. If you cut funding in one area, it will produce adverse results elsewhere, and we've seen that. We've seen that in the deterioration of services for victims and vulnerable people, and I think the Police and Crime Commissioner has a responsibility to stand up and protect and be a voice and advocate for those people. I think it's also really important in this election to take some of the power away from the centre and empower local communities to determine the priorities for their own area. I think, having said that, we know the public want neighbourhood policing. They know they want us to defend neighbourhood policing because it comes up all the time. They want the police to be visible because that is a reassurance, and it is also a way of reducing crime. But the other thing I want to make a point about is not to have any expansion in the role of the PCC. There are lots of proposals from the government at the moment to expand the role of the PCC, including to take over the responsibility for the fire and rescue service, and I simply don't think that is the right way to go, so we need to stand up and resist that. So thank you very much indeed.
Good evening, Lester Taylor from the UK Independence Party. I've spent some time in the Royal Navy, the National Health Service, and I've been a financial advisor, so I've got a good background in many areas, and I'm also actually serving as Shaftesbury Town Councillor, so I know a bit about working for the people and getting the best I can. Now, I got into this because I saw last November that the cuts that were being announced just before the autumn statement, and I thought, look at what they're doing to the police, look at what the government is about to do to the police. And then at the last minute they did get a bit of a reprieve, but I thought I've got to get into this to make sure that I can take the battle to Westminster to reverse some of these cuts. And I know where we can get the money from by leaving the European Union, £55 million a day, and we can put some of that back into the police, and that's what I firmly believe, and I'll be fighting hard for that. Thank you very much.
And the Conservatives, Andrew Graham.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have a record to defend, so we need to start from here. You're talking, I'm listening. Dorset generally says it wants emergency response, it wants safeguarding of vulnerable people, and it wants community policing. More locally, Boscombe is concerned about drugs, it's concerned about crime, it's concerned about homelessness, and both the causes and the consequences of all of those three things. And I would listen to what you're saying and make sure that we did something about them, working with the police, local government and the others to be sure of that. So why me? 36 years a soldier, I understand what it is to have effect on the ground, close working with the police from a police station for 2 years. I get what the police need to do, I get how they work with local communities, and I get the difficulties that they face. South Armagh, Portadown, Lurgan, those areas have all the mix of problems, rural and urban, that we see in Dorset. I am convinced that I know and have the experience from my past to carry forward to the future, because we need to be looking to the future and draw a line under where we are today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. So we're going to move swiftly on. Just to reiterate, these were questions that have come through to the forum. We've kind of amalgamated them and popped into sort of 6 definite themes and questions for the candidates to answer this evening. First of all, Martyn is going to come and answer the question. What is your understanding of Boscombe and the challenges in policing that this area has? You're up, yeah.
Sorry, is that one? No, sorry, it's confusing as who's doing what. Can we do that again?
Certainly.
Right.
What's the question?
I don't know.
Well, this is the question up here. So we get 2 minutes each to answer.
Okay.
And it's the same question for all of you, and then we'll go in turn answering the same question.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Boscombe is one of the most eclectic and diverse communities in this county and in the southwest, and I love it. But it has some of the most complex issues. It is one of the most deprived wards in the southwest of England, and most of that is caused by housing. A third of the population of this town, of this area, have lived here for less than 2 years. And if you look at the housing issues, 70% of housing in this area is rented, and 90% of it is flats. Those issues cause its own societal issues, including drugs and the cookery that comes from that, and the London gangs coming down to pass drugs in Boscombe. We also have issues of people coming from prison into this area, although as BCC and with the local MP to Barcelona, we have stopped an awful lot of that in the last 3 years. We also have a homeless situation in Boscombe and indeed across this whole town. 47 homeless people counted in Boscombe a few weeks ago, which is a 300% increase since 2010. We also have an alcohol issue, and we have an education issue. Educationally, Boscombe is below the curve. And if you look at it as a community, a fantastic, vibrant community reflected in who's here tonight. But it has some really big societal issues, and from a policing point of view, you can't do it on your own. And when I stood here in 2012, in this very room, I think actually, at the forum, I said that we cannot do this alone, and I've always said you cannot enforce your way out of societal issues such as drug addiction, homelessness, street drinking, and sex working on the streets. It has to be a partnership approach with partners. And I'm very proud of the fact that as an independent PCC, I challenged the government a lot. I challenged Conservative councils in Dorset a lot. But I also work with them a lot. And I have an excellent working relationship with Bournemouth Council. It's a bit fraught on occasions. We disagree on a few things. But actually we've achieved a lot in Boscombe between the council, the police crime commissioner, and the voluntary sector in the last 3 years. What do we need to do in the future? I'm just looking whether you're asking me for the future and I've run out. So that's where we are at the moment. I'll tell you about the future later.
We'll get to it. Thank you. Thank you, Martyn. So, Canavan, any questions, please? So again, what's your understanding of Boscombe and the challenges in policing that this area has?
Okay, I live on Manor Road, so I walk through Boscombe pretty much every day, and the challenges that Martyn described are pretty visible, and housing is key to that. I think it's absolutely scandalous the way in which I believe Bournemouth Council are abrogating their responsibility to deal with the homeless. The number of homeless people has increased, and the level of support that they get is decreasing. We were talking the other day to some of the charitable voluntary sector organisations that support these people, and their funding is being cut. They're finding it more difficult to support the homeless, and more difficult to try and get them back into a more normalised way of working. So there are massive challenges, but the place itself has incredible potential, and it is about the community. If through the work that you do, we can do something to regenerate the community spirit and to get people working together, looking after each other, then I think it could be the vibrant place it was once. Somebody was telling me when we were delivering leaflets there a week or so ago about the history of Boscombe and about the fact that there was a music hall there. And those days seem quite a long time ago, but there's no reason with the right investment, with the right will, we can't regenerate that kind of atmosphere in the locality again. But it needs work. And the way in which I think the Police and Crime Commissioner has a role in this is by challenging the council, by challenging those people that make these kinds of decisions, but as Martyn has described, working with the other agencies, because we're not going to be able to solve these issues on our own. We are only going to be able to do it through collaborative working, and that is absolutely crucial. We have to get some kind of cooperation, some kind of vision about how we're going to take not just Boscombe forward, but the whole of Dorset forward in all its different forms, because the cuts are hitting and they're hurting. And they're hurting the most vulnerable people, and there are a lot of those in Boscombe.
Thank you, Patric. Okay, so Lester.
Good evening. Yes, I live in sunny Shaftesbury, which is way up north. I don't come down here that often, but I have been around here recently, and I've seen that this area does have its own challenges. I've talked to many people who said that they have a bit of a problem with some antisocial behaviour and stuff like this. I went on the police website, and lo and behold, one of the biggest complaints there was antisocial behaviour, was blighting the lives of certain people. But the Boscombe is not just my vision, it is also your vision. What do you want it to be? And that's what I want to find out, what you want to make of it. And then we can work towards that. But one of the big things I want to do is to try and address this antisocial behaviour problem and go for zero tolerance in antisocial behaviour hotspots. So that's going to be one of the things that I want to drive at. And that way, we can then start moving on the crime away and then start trying to turn Boscombe into what you want it to be, which I believe is a very big, vibrant place. And that really is as much as I want to say about that at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Les.
Ladies and gentlemen, describes itself award-winning beaches and parks, diverse, resilient and adaptable, yet there is a relative decline and a relative deterioration by comparison with other parts of Dorset. And that is a hard and difficult situation with which to deal. What's very clear is things like Project Galaxy, which has really started to draw all the institutions together, council, police, housing and other aspects of life together, has started to have an effect, but there is obviously more to do. Define the problem facing the policing. 1, drugs, I mentioned it first. 2nd, crime. And 3rd, homes, housing, but more particularly sort of multi-occupancy accommodation, which needs to be up to standard and needs not to just be attracting vulnerable people to a place where they're not being looked after and not being paid attention to. In a sense, they're getting better and more opportunities rather than fewer. Is that a police problem? No, clearly it's not. But the causes of prevention of crime and the upstream work is something the police can work with others to do, and of course responding to crime and using all the powers available to the police as and when they are needed is something that is really, really crucial, in which I believe in. What else are the other challenges? You can't have a picture of a society if you don't understand all its workings and complexities. So greater data sharing, information sharing between all the various agencies. The New York Police Department share data with 8 other agencies. That's unheard of 4 years ago. But that's what they're now doing. Result, a much better opportunity to deal with crime and the causes of crime and get upstream of those sort of things, rather than just simply always being responding and reacting. You want an accessible, you want a responsive police that's relevant to the needs of the community. And above all, you need a police that listens to what you are concerned about.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now what we're going to do is mix up the order, so each time we go along, so if we can start with the person next in the line, guys, if you understand that, does that make sense? So we'll start with Patrick this time, and the question is, what's the most important to you, crime reduction or harm reduction? Patrick.
I'm not prepared to make a distinction between the two, because I think you can actually do both at the same time. I think it's really important that you do everything you can to reduce crime, and there is lots of work that can be done around crime prevention. One of the issues about the funding arrangement is that some of the funding isn't ring-fenced. So it is really, really important that you ensure that whoever is elected, as PCC ensures, that that whole range of money that is there to support crime prevention isn't spent on other stuff. But it is also true to say that we need to do a lot more in terms of harm reduction too. But that is also about self-protection, about ensuring that people are aware of the issues, are aware of what to do in particular sets of circumstances. One of the things that concerns me is that we have people in the society who are at risk of harming themselves for a whole range of reasons, and also because their actions, because of their health condition, can potentially harm other people. Yet we're not doing anything to support those people, and that the service sector, in order to be able to support those people, is simply disappearing. So we have to help the victims of crime, and we have to help those who are at risk of offending. Unless we tackle those two things together, I really don't think we're going to make any progress at all.
Thank you.
I would tend to agree with Patrick on the fact that you can't separate the two, crime reduction or harm reduction. Two are sort of go hand in glove, really. If you've got the crime, you're going to get the harm. And if you just go to try and address the harm and don't address the crime, the harm will always be there because it will just be an end result of the crime that's there. So what you've got to do is try, does that mean you've got to address both? But so you want to do it, as I said, both together. But the way for me to do that is to actually just get more visible policing on the street in order to address the crime reduction in the first place. I would much rather see a lot more police on the street, and I think we can do that. If we leave the European Union, we can get the money to do that, I believe. But without that, we are fighting a downward spiral of cuts that will affect the amount of police you've got available to you. And if you haven't got the police available to you, you're not going to get the crime reduction. So I think the first thing we've got to do is get the police numbers back up and start really pushing the 22% reduction in police funding that we've had for the last 6 years, we need to reverse that. And without that, we're just going to go further and down, have fewer police officers, and we're going to get more crime, and we're just going to get more harm, I'm afraid. So we just need to, I believe, get more officers on the beat and more officers in the police force, and that's the first step.
It's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? But actually crime harms, doesn't it? It doesn't matter how big or small it is. If you're on the end of it, it harms. It hurts. And of course, it's a question of degree. And of course, at another level, someone is then having to make a judgment between the relevance and the levels of those degrees. I think we should be concentrating on what the impact of a particular crime is on an individual and on the community at large. So we've got some choices. We could reduce crime levels overall, and almost by definition, overall harm to society will come down. Or we can really focus on the most harmful crimes, discuss and define, and the overall harm to society will come down, or whether you might reduce crime by 3 or 4, but it is a grotesque case of child abuse going on in that area, extraordinarily harmful and damaging to those individuals, and by extension to their families and others, but at the same time, maybe, just maybe, the overall impact on levels of crime and the way in which the community at large feels is not perhaps as widespread as it might be. But of course, we would all want to say that is a real, fundamental, important area. I'd like to open another area on that. If you consider internet crime and the extent that 5 clicks away from a YouTube video puts you in touch with some disgusting and revolting stuff, if we can start to tackle in that area, which is generally harmful to the whole of our society, because it's affecting our young children, it's affecting families, it's affecting geriatrics. There are geriatrics now in prison for child abuse, all because of that following on through the internet and some of those grotesque pornography sites. That sort of area. Is that overall, should we be focusing there, is a question that we'll have to deal with, and I'm not sure yet whether that, relative to what goes on the ground, is important. So, chicken and egg, harmful to the individual, but all crime harms because it hurts the individual.
I think you can separate harm and crime reduction. They cross over, but actually harm can happen without crime being reported, and of course a person can harm themselves. They can self-harm or they can be mentally ill and harm themselves. And therefore, in my view, we need to increase the facilities for people to report crime without going to the police, i.e. third-party reporting. My dream is the Victims Bureau, which is just opening phase 2 down the road from here, where you can report harm to people as well as crime to people. What's really interesting is Peter Nehru and Cambridge University are lobbying the government at the moment with my support to change the way you record crime. It's not good enough to use numbers. 5 bicycle deaths cannot be compared in any way to 5 rapes. We have to start using the harm to the victim as the guide to the seriousness of the crime. If somebody is mentally ill and vulnerable, the death of them, their petrol cycle will be huge. Whereas some of us in this room, the petrol cycle wouldn't even be reported. We have to start recording crime in a way that records the harm that's been caused to the victim. You can separate harm from crime. They do cross over, but to me there's 2 channels of work there. Talking about the issue of crime reduction, I have funded 3 early intervention initiatives in this county, one of them in Bournemouth, in a school in West Howe. I believe that if you can let every child at 5 go to school being able to read, write and talk properly, you can change a generation. And I have funded initiatives to do that. We have speech therapists in West Howe helping children at school, trying to give them a leg up so they don't go through school in the lower tier, come out without qualifications and become a victim. Crime reduction is a key part of policing, and I've always treated it as such as Police Crime Commissioner, and I will continue to do so. Harm reduction is also Police Crime Commissioner's issue. I've got very involved in mental health, and particularly in this area. I represent PCCs nationally with mental health. If people are mentally ill, they will harm themselves. If people are being bullied online, as Andrew said, they will self-harm, or they will get anorexia or bulimia or some other health-related issue. And that actually is a societal issue that police need to get involved with, because people are making them feel vulnerable. Bullies need to be dealt with online as well as on the streets. And I don't agree with what Lester said. It is about the police officers on the street. It's about changing people who change behaviours in relation to harm.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to fire on with question 3. So we'll have Lester on the question of, with the increasing problems associated with mental health, sexual exploitation and cybercrime, how would you prioritise resources and employ strategies to tackle these issues?
Now that's a wide range. Sorry, that was a very wide-ranging question. Yeah, tackling mental health for a start. That's much more of an on-the-ground, face-to-face issue with people. Having talked to on Tuesday with some of the volunteers from Dorset Watch, the Association with Dorset Watch, became very clear that they're worried at the level of dealing with people with mental health, because they end up in circumstances where they do need support, and maybe not, it's not police support, so we need to be looking at other forms of support for that. Sexual exploitation can take many different forms, from close in family to right out on the internet, where people are sort of conned into doing things over their cameras and all this sort of thing. And that is a very wide and difficult thing to address. Most of that, I would say, would come down to somehow educating the younger people as they're going through the system and the school system. I know that's happening already, because one of my friends got a young girl who's going through school, and she says every time she goes on the internet at school, she's got it banged into her, don't do this, don't do that. And we need to continue that through. And cybercrime itself, how that can be someone in a foreign country spamming you, sending out loads of emails on a very wide basis, and they can go to many different countries and many different police areas. So how do you stop that? How can you do that for an individual force area? You have to start talking to GCHQ or the National Crime Agency and people like that, who can have the funding to address that. The cybercrime can also be a bit closer to home, so and it covers all sorts of things through mobile phones. So that comes down to, once again, education, especially with certain vulnerable people on the internet who may be sort of encouraged to part with cash, and we need to be talking to people to educate these, and I believe that the volunteers who work very closely with these people are very well placed to do that.
Right, all three are very specialist. They're difficult, they're not easy to spot, but when they come through, all of them have a really difficult and catastrophic effect, not only on the individual, but on their families and on those who are around them. So the first thing is there needs to be specialist support. And not all of that, in fact much of it will not necessarily be in the police, but it's got to be working with others in order to make sure that those capabilities are there in a responsive, immediate and accessible fashion when and where things are done. I said earlier we need to draw a line under where we are before we start to look forward. So that is the first point, working with others to make sure that these emerging issues, because they have always been there, but they're now emerging in the consciousness, are starting to be dealt with. The second is education, education, education. It is getting upstream of the issue and making people starting to be aware that in addition to having the rights to be protected, you also have a responsibility to be protected. For instance, it is illegal to have an Instagram account under 13, but it's amazing how many children of 8, 9 and 10 do, because their parents set it up for them. So there's a responsibility question in there as well, and education is important. And not just go to a website. I'm afraid we're in a world where it's got to be cascaded and pushed out so that it's on the drip. You can take it from the bottle, as it were. The third area is there are lessons, there are good things being done in other countries and in other parts of this country. And we need to bring in the lessons and focus on what works, using evidence and other things. And we need to be swift and quick about doing all of that. And finally, we need to prevent, I've lost my glasses, that is my problem. We need to prevent as much as we can through a combination of education, through a combination of working together, and a combination of communicating with young people, vulnerable people, and all those who might be affected. And in terms of priority, sexual exploitation through the net has to be the most egregiously harmful of all of those.
Nationally and locally, I have worked long and hard on mental health to try and reduce the amount of people in crisis going into police cells, and I've done that. In the last 6 months, one person has gone into a police station in Dorset in crisis, and no children since April 2015 have gone into a police cell in crisis. I've introduced and funded the street triage scheme. We have a liaison diversion scheme in Dorset to divert offenders who are mentally ill from the courts. We have a repeat victim scheme introduced by me and funded by me with Dorset Healthcare, which helps the 30 or so people who have serious mental illness and are very vulnerable. We have inputted into the mental health crisis pathway review, and as a result of that, we are getting a House of Calm in Bournemouth, hopefully in Boscombe, which is a good way of getting into mental health before people get to crisis. The biggest issue nationally and locally in Dorset is we don't have a tier 2. We have a deep duty surgery and you end up in crisis or you end up in camps. That's not good enough. We need to have the services in the middle, and I've worked long and hard with police crime commissioners to do that. And I will continue to do that. But actually it's really important to look after the police as well. I've started a Blue Light Pledge looking after the mental health of police officers, and I've just introduced this week with the Chief Constable the 8-step programme for police officers who are assaulted to get them back to work, making sure that they're mentally fit as well as physically fit. Child sexual exploitation is a huge issue, as Andrew has already said. I've introduced the police online investigation team, and those numbers have doubled twice since I've been police crime commissioner, and will double again. We are going to increase that team again. That's why I raised the precept this year. I've introduced the Protecting Vulnerable People Board that I sit on, that looks at people who are vulnerable, particularly in relation to CSE. We've created the Child Sexual Exploitation team in the last 2 years, and that team is about to double in size. And I, including people in this audience, have created the charity called Acts Fast, which is there to look after the parents and the children who are abused, because this government doesn't do enough to look after children who are victims. And I still commission services and will continue to do so for children and parents who've been abused. Didn't get the cybercrime, sorry. Big question.
Thank you. Yeah, it's about education, and it's reassuring to hear a Conservative Party candidate quote Tony Blair. I did an interview, one of the first interviews I did when I was selected for this role was with the Dorset Echo down in Weymouth. And the first question kind of sent me back on my heels a bit, because they said, name one good thing that Martyn Underhill's done. And I said mental health. Because it is important, and it is so important, and it actually crosses, I think, party political and non-party political boundaries. But there is a huge amount of work still to be done. I don't think we probably disagree about that. It is a massive problem, and not just about the kind of problems that the NHS are facing with mental health services and the deterioration of mental health services. There is an issue about learning disabilities, and there is an issue about people who have or have not got capacity when they find themselves in trouble with the police. And that is an education program, not just on us, not just the kids in school to protect them from cyberbullying, but it is also an education role for the police. And there's still a massive amount of work that we have to do to break down stigma and barriers that exist to trying to support people with learning disabilities. And we need also to ensure that advocacy is available for those people. And that again is something which I think the Police and Crime Commissioner could do. One of the challenges around cybercrime that the police are facing, not just in Dorset but everywhere, is that it doesn't necessarily come from Dorset. The people on the end of the computer who are doing the grooming or are doing the bullying are not necessarily operating their computer in Dorset. And that is a real concern, and that is why additional resources do need to be found to support the police in being able to track down people who are doing this. Thank you.
In hindsight, that question, I think, is that, you know, each one of those subjects is a vast area, so well done for the 2 minutes fitting that in there, chaps. But there's time to ask more specific questions from the audience near the end, so if you want to go back into those topics, and you've got some good questions, obviously we can focus in on those when you ask. Actually, this fourth question, I think, even through the Boscombe Forum, this is an issue we find in Boscombe, the hard to reach groups, the diverse community, which, is quite often, these groups are quite often hard to penetrate. Tackling a difficult job for everyone, let alone a prospective police crime commissioner. So the question is, how do you intend on engaging the public, especially with hard to reach groups in Boscombe's diverse community?
You've just about said the answer, which is I would need to make sure that I was talking with the local representatives and from as many and diverse communities as possible. And by communities, I don't necessarily mean wards, and I don't necessarily mean towns, villages. I don't, for instance, think that there is a rural and an urban community. Actually, farms are businesses. So there's a crossover between businesses, and so business communities should encompass both of those sort of things. So if you're coming into Boscombe, and Boscombe is a very diverse community, I would need the help from the councillors, I would need help from local representatives, I would certainly be talking to parish priests and members of the church, parish councillors and other things, but also walking and talking and identifying who the particular community leaders were. I'm sure Martyn has been trying to do that for the last 3 years and probably very successfully. But there must be people out there who are willing to engage, provided it's a subject is of relevance and interest to them. And here we're talking about common interest and the question of whether or not safer communities are actually to the benefit of everybody, not just those who feel put upon or in some way threatened by the diversity of the communities, but those who in effect are making those communities diverse and themselves perhaps feeling threatened and under some sort of pressure. So actually, help from the local community is the only answer. It's no good parachuting in and just saying, here I am, come and talk to me. It's got to be done much more subtly and probably through a network, and a network perhaps of informed people who are prepared to come to talk informally about the issues that affect their particular areas, with an understanding that it will be part of informing the choices that will need to be taken in the future.
Can I just say, these are really good questions. They really do test you as a candidate, I like to say. Okay, I have won national awards for engagement as PCC, and as two candidates already said, or Andrew said, this is a really difficult area. I think I've done okay. Can I get better? Yes, I can. A lot better. But let me tell you what I have done. I have a Polish advocate who works in the Polish community in Boscombe. I work with One Big First, which is based in Boscombe, which looks after the learning and disabled community. I have forums, some of you know that, some of you have been to my forums, and I hold public surgeries in Boscombe. I was here 3 weeks ago. But, despite all that, I'm still missing a huge part of the population. And as the compere said at the beginning, the chair said, this is a hugely difficult area. What can I do differently? Well, I've learned a lot in 3 years. I think I can do three things differently. One is, I can look at online forums. The Chief Constable and I are committed that 101 will go online in the next year to 18 months, which means you can Skype in to talk to the police. And actually from that whole concept, the new Dorset Police website, by the way, launches next week. Make sure you have a look at it. Launches a week on Monday. That new website will enable us to talk to people online. And I think online forums may be a way forward to try and engage with more community in Boscombe. Because when I talked about the community in Boscombe earlier, the other thing about Boscombe is it can be quite young in certain parts. Some of the age groups are really young. Therefore, they embrace technology, social media, and I think online forums might work. I also think networks that Andrew talked about is a good approach. I have tried that. I've done well in some areas and not in others. There is a huge swathe of Boscombe that I haven't reached. I accept that. Most councillors accept that. It's really hard to get to. And the other two I've missed, I think, with hindsight, which I'll do this time round, is churches. There is a really big church community in Boscombe, and I've talked to various churches in this area, but I haven't tried to engage with the congregations as well as I should, and I think that's a possible way in. The other way in is that the population who don't want to engage, don't want to talk to people, don't want to come to the forum, I've run out of time, aren't parents, so engage with the children at the schools. Thank you.
We met on Tuesday a range of representatives from voluntary sector organisations across Bournemouth and Poole. One of the key things I think for me that came out of that was the reach of those organisations. So when we talk about how do you reach them or how to reach groups, the question we have to ask ourselves is who's reaching them? Who is reaching them? And if it's the voluntary sector, then we need to talk to them. If it's the local community, if it's neighbours, then we need to talk to them. And it is about trying to create a structure that enables those people to come together. Because the way in which the cuts have hit people, one of the effects of it anyway, is to kind of scatter people to the four winds. People are struggling in their own small organisations simply to keep those organisations going. And we're not doing nearly enough to support them and to help them support each other. So I think there's a massive amount of work that we can do to help reach those groups of the community who are not engaged at the moment. My view is that engagement is good, but we've got to do better than engagement. There were more than 80% of the population didn't even vote in these elections in 2012. That's a massive proportion of the population. So what are we going to do to change that? We have to empower people to be able to make these decisions for themselves. Because unless they feel connected, unless they feel that what they say can make a difference, then we're always going to be struggling against a kind of democratic deficit. We have to be able to show that what people say can bring results. And that is about more engagement, more power, more community involvement. And that you only achieve that by leadership, by bringing people together, and by hard work and working with local communities and organisations.
Hard to reach groups. There are two sorts of people in the community, those that want to talk to you and those that don't. The ones that want to talk to you, you can find that they find you. But the hard to reach groups, you probably don't even know that they exist. You don't even know they're there, because they don't want to engage with you at all, and it's very hard to get to see them. Now, how do you get through to that sort of community, a community that doesn't want to engage? It might not be very big, but it needs to be part of this community. It needs to be part of the community. That's what you need. You need good old-fashioned, I'm afraid, community policing. That's why I keep going back to this, having police officers that are there and available, and people can see them. We need the funding so that they can then be out there. And when people are used to seeing them, they might start engaging with them. Because if they don't see them, they don't know the police are there, and they then don't engage. And it is very, very hard if they don't want to engage. You can't force them to. You want them to come forward voluntarily. And that is a big challenge, and I don't see, personally, any way you can do it with applications on your iPhone or websites or anything like that. It comes down to talking to people face to face with other people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think Boscombe is especially relevant in those terms. I mean, 28 different languages spoken at St Clement's School. I mean, that sort of puts into perspective the challenges that I think everyone's involved with in this area. But hopefully, yeah, it sounds like there'll be some good initiatives to help with that. This is an interesting one actually. We had recently, I think it's the Bournemouth Resident Satisfaction Survey that's done by the council, and some of the statistics there are still showing that whilst crime is falling, the perception of crime is still as high as it ever was. This question is around that, that sort of dislocation there. So how would you increase the public confidence in policing and challenge the perception of increasing crime?
Okay, so today was very timely because the British Crime Survey came out today and shows that crime is still falling by 7%. But the British Crime Survey doesn't include cybercrime or online crime. It does now include fraud. So crime is still going down. Why then has some crime in Dorset gone up? And why is there a perception that crime is going up? So let's talk about what's going up firstly. Most crime in Dorset, including in Boscombe, has gone down. Burglary, theft from vehicles, and social behaviour has dropped massively in Dorset. What's gone up? Violent crime's gone up, and sexual offences have gone up, and domestic abuse has gone up. Now, we need to celebrate two of those. I, as Police Crime Commissioner, will never criticise an increase in domestic abuse, and I will never criticise an increase in sexual offence reporting. We need victims to come forward, and we know they are. I don't think there's more sexual offences being committed. I think we've actually got more confidence in the police. And that is, if you look at child sexual exploitation or child sexual abuse, we've had a 300% increase in 3 years of those reports, and we are predicting 200,000 child sexual abuse cases being reported by 2020. That's a fourfold increase. And my concern, when I was talking to voluntary sectors a couple of weeks ago at a conference in Bournemouth, was how the charities, the support networks, the wraparound services I provide and other people provide cope with a fourfold increase in child sexual abuse. It's a real worry. But crime is going up quite correctly in my view in that area. The arrest of crime is going down. The public don't understand that. We're not selling that message very well. That is a challenge for the Police Crime Commissioner. It's a challenge for me. I think I engage with the public quite well. I am very good at media publicity, but public perception is what matters. Public perception is what keeps people safe in their minds, and we're not telling them what we're doing with crime. So I do accept there's a problem. Public confidence has gone up in Dorset since I've been the Police Crime Commissioner, particularly in relation to being kept informed because we have a Victims Bureau. But the challenge is still there.
It is a big challenge. One of the things I think that would help is, this isn't meant as a criticism, it's meant as a suggestion. I feel, personally, that the police are a bit over-defensive. If you think that the service needs to be improved, and if you think things can be improved, I think we have a right to be able to say that can be improved, that should be improved, and that you need to do it this way rather than that way. I think as a community we have a right to say that without necessarily making the police prickly in response. I think there is a need to have a much stronger connection between what the public feel and what the police do. And this is why I keep talking about the difference between engagement and giving people some kind of empowerment to make decisions for themselves. The issue about confidence, when the police did a survey a little while ago about public satisfaction, it produced results saying that 70% of the population were satisfied with the police's performance. But, you know, the question, because I'm a cynic, I said, well, what about the other 30%? What about the people who haven't asked the question or haven't responded to the questionnaire? What are they saying? Who's asking them? How do we engage with them? And I think the way in which that we overcome this is not just by telling people what they do, but by allowing people to have some say over what is done. I think that is the crucial difference. The other thing, I think, is about trying to ensure that people can make a difference. I know I've said this before, but somebody from the Neighbourhood Watch scheme rang me today, and they were just explaining to me how it works and the struggles that they're having in just keeping the organisation going. A bit of that is about money, but a lot of it is also about a falling away of people who are just prepared to give up their time to do it. And I think somehow or another we have to encourage those sorts of organisations to be able to exist and support each other.
Yeah, the first thing is on the perception of increasing crime. Figures may say crime is going up, crime is going down, but it's what people feel at the end of the day about where crime is going. And although crime may be going down in certain areas, it's probably going up in other areas. People who engage in crime aren't going to easily just give it up and go and work in the local newsagent. They're going to divert their attention to something else. And that seems to me at the moment to be in the area of cybercrime and fraud, which has not been included in the figures up until recently, and that may start boosting the figures, so you're getting an overall increase in crime again. We don't know until the figures come out. But if there is that perception in increasing crime, you've got to remember that the public generally, they'll touch the police maybe once or twice in their lives when they phone one of those numbers. And what they want to see is it happens, they want the telephone to be answered quickly, they want to be able to engage with the police quickly, and they want a result. And that's what will build public confidence, or at least they can see the mechanisms that's doing it. And even if there's no successful outcome for them, at least they know that the police have tried as hard as they can to do it. And one of those things, as has been pointed out, maybe we need to be trumpeting a bit more about what the police are actually achieving. They're doing a hell of a lot in the background that no one ever sees. So, having gone to the headquarters, you can see all that they're getting up to. You can see that what's happening in the call centre, when you phone 101 and 999, sorry. You can see what they're doing. And you sort of get an idea, yeah, these people are dedicated, they're there to help. But I just think, overall, they lack the government funding, they lack the government commitment to them. And I think that we need to be, as communities across the country, saying, hey, that's enough cuts. We want to get our police back up again.
Security and rule of law is a preeminent responsibility of government, and that translates locally into public safety and good policing. Working with the communities to make public safety and good policing work and happen. I think one thing we've got to do, and it's a big battle to get to, is we've got to get away from the us and them approach to the we approach. When are we all going to deal with some of the issues that we face, rather than it's all them and on that day? That is a perception issue, it's a narrative issue, and I'll come back to narrative. The second thing, clearly, is perception matters. If it's really true that for most of the public they will only engage with the police in a situation where they really need policing is twice in their lives, you only get one chance to make a first impression. So that first impression really, really counts. And for most people, that impression may be a face-to-face conversation, but more likely in this modern world, it's the 101 service. And we need to make sure that that 101 service is as responsive and effective and prompt and accessible and quick as it possibly can be. And it isn't. I know that because people tell me it isn't, but equally, if you ring it, it's interesting where you can sometimes end up. It's not the first response, that's probably brilliant. 3 rings, you're done. It's what then happens and where you go after that. So there's a real issue there. That is, for many people, the first contact. The second is this is not about a propaganda exercise. The more you trumpet at people, people start to suspect you. This is about conversations with a trusted, reliable, experienced individual or spokesperson who is frank and honest about the choices needing to be made and why things were done and where they were done. Call it transparency, call it whatever you want. And that ultimately comes back to getting the right narrative. What are we doing over the next 4 years? What will it look like for you? What does good look like in 3 to 4 years' time? Where do we go from there?
And so on to the final question from the first half, and I think we've touched upon it already, cuts happening all around us. This question, in respect of the budget, where do you see the priorities for policing in Boscombe, especially in light of those future potential cuts?
It's going to be about making sure we put officers back on the beat, keeping police visible. That's got to be the key priority, and to resist as far as we possibly can those cuts. And we only do that through political action. One of the issues I think about the budget is that although this year, in this current financial year, Dorset haven't done quite as badly as they thought, Dorset Police haven't done quite as badly as they thought they might, because the government had to do a bit of a backtrack on changing the policing formula. But that issue hasn't gone away. That issue is going to resurface in the not too distant future, and Dorset Police and every other police force across the country will be faced with this particular country. This is not an economic argument. Let's be clear about this. That cuts and austerity is not an economic argument. It's a political decision. These are political decisions made by a political party for political reasons. Unless we grasp that, we are going to avoid this issue altogether. We have to ensure that we get as much money as possible by whatever means possible, whether it's representation, whether it's going up and speaking to people in Westminster, and then ensure when you do get it, it goes to the right place. But key to that is police visibility, because that's what people want.
I would agree with Patrick. I think that cuts are more coming. I believe there are more cuts coming. In fact, Sandra Dilnott, who's in charge of the UK Statistics Authority, said just recently that the Chancellor did protect funding to the police, like he said he did. It was actually 3,200 police officers' wages were being cut effectively. How that will translate, we don't know yet, over the next 2 years. Now, if these cuts do come about, it's not going to be about prioritising in Boscombe, I'm afraid. It's going to be about prioritising across the whole of Dorset. The job of the PCC is to make everybody in the whole of Dorset equally safe. And that means that hard choices will have to be made right across the piece. And every time they cut, it means another review, another look at everything, which then takes time and money to do in its own right. We need to be sending a big message through to the government that enough is enough. If you want to have confidence in policing, you've got to have the proper money put into the police so that they've got the right numbers of police, so that they're there when you want them. And in fact, why not have a few too many? Because that will give you a little bit of fat in the system, which most people need. When things do go badly, then you've got enough people there. And then you've got enough time and money for training and all the other stuff. Because one of the things that came out at that meeting we had on Tuesday with the Dorset Watches was that they were worried that training would be cut to police officers for certain courses on things like diversity and all the other things that are really important. And without that, then we are in danger of once again losing confidence in the police if they're not properly trained. We need this central funding to stop being cut.
Where do I see the priorities of policing in Boscombe? Well, you tell me. When you've told me what the priorities are, then we can deal with them and address them. Like potential future cuts, let's leave that out there for the moment, because that's a political point which has which is something that just needs to be parked at this stage. But what I would say is that wailing and wringing one's hands about the cuts is going to make life very, very difficult, because you're not actually doing anything. You're talking, not doing. So we need to be thinking about doing. Right, the first thing I suspect you would say is we want to prevent crime. We want to follow it up effectively when it happens. We want to look at the causes and work with others to make sure that the causes and situations and circumstances from which crime and the other issues that are of importance for policing in Boscombe stem from. Then we have to work with others in order to achieve those sort of things. We have to accept and believe that not seeing a policeman on the street does not mean that policing is not taking place. Effective policing is not taking place in terms of intelligent data sharing, dealing with the upstream things rather than necessarily just being there on the spot. A policeman standing on a traffic scheme there, maybe not preventing the crime that is really going on in a darkened room in some other area. But if you know about it and can act on it, then you can start to them. Future challenges are complex and they're resource hungry. We're going to have to invest in the uniformed and the warranted police officers to use the capability and capacity of warranted officers really effectively for the things that only warranted officers can do. But in the overall policing effort, there is room for a variety of other capabilities, civilians, PCSOs, special constables, and volunteers to enhance and broaden the reach of the policing effort, while concentrating on focusing on what uniformed, warranted officers only they can do.
Okay, we have got a neutral budget until 2020 if the PCC raises the precinct for the next 3 years, as I have this year. That is a political point, as Andrew said. But the point is, we're not facing huge cuts. As your police crime commissioner, I've overseen already 20% cuts in my term. So I know what it is to meet efficiency savings and try and keep police officers on the streets. I intend to recruit more officers in this term. How am I going to do that? Well, if you have a neutral budget, which we have, I can do it in 3 ways. The first one is the strategic alliance I entered into, the first ever PCC-led strategic alliance in this country. We are already realising £15 million of savings between the two forces. I intend to drive that further up to 20 million. That £5 million coming back between the two forces will be used to reinvest in new police officers. We can continue to improve our efficiency savings. I have saved millions of pounds so far in efficiency savings, like taking away bureaucracy, giving police officers laptops so they don't need to go back to police stations, by shutting inefficient police stations that are run down and costing hundreds of thousands of pounds to run. We can continue that journey. And then we have the Safe Dorset Foundation. I set this up 3 weeks ago. It's a charitable foundation that is going to income generate through work with partners, through work with the EU and all the other grants we can access, and through philanthropy. And the Safe Dorset Foundation will help fund initiatives in the community, and in doing that, free up money that will enable me to acquire more police officers and more PCSOs. I will be incredibly disappointed if in this next term, with a reasonably stable budget, that I cannot increase the establishment of Dorset Police. When it comes to Boscombe's priority, that's the Chief Constable decision. I am not in charge of operational policing, but I can help provide money and resources to help the Chief Constable prioritise. What do I think is coming up as the priorities for Boscombe in the next 3 years? I think it's mental health, mental health, mental health. I think it's child sexual abuse. I think it's cyber crime. And the one that's coming over the horizon, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first, is exploitation of the vulnerable elderly population we have in this county. Our elderly population are at risk, and it will come out in the next 3 years.
So, thank you very much for all the candidates. Obviously, that was quite focused, quite pointed, quite specific. We've rattled through, and they've done very well with the questions posed. So now we're into the second half, and we're going to open it up to the floor. So we're going to pick questions direct, so I think in this instance we'd prefer a question asked to one of the candidates only. So have your candidates in mind as well. So let's start at the front with a question here from Roger.
Thank you very much. I hope you can understand me. The question is to Mr. Ware. I've been hoping to refer my first public meeting since having been struck down with pneumonia, but I think it's so important I'm here. Mr. Ware, you are standing as a Conservative. You sounded very plausible from what you were saying, but you are going to have to defend the cuts your Conservatives brought in. I'm not sure how you're going to do that. But you do raise the question of pornography. I think pornography, there should be a zero tolerance on pornography. Would you support the idea that we have a councillor in Bournemouth who was found to have pornography on his council laptop, but is still re-elected? Is that the party you support?
First of all, I'm glad to see you here, and well done recovering. I think it's a game effort, and it shows how important you think the issue is. So I think we'd all say, wish you a safer recovery and a safer recovery. I think your question was, do I think that if there is a council with pornography on his laptop, should he be there in that position? And I think the answer very clearly is no. Is that what your question was?
He was found to have it.
He was found to have it.
But he was therapeutically exonerated. He still had it.
He was exonerated, but he still had it on his laptop.
Was he exonerated in a court of law?
There's a very strange tribunal.
I don't think that's really...
I mean, ultimately the question, I suppose, at the bottom of that is, a zero tolerance on pornography. What's your opinion?
Yes, I mean, if there is an allegation made, and the police's job is impartially to gather evidence and not to come to a conclusion beforehand about whether there's guilt or innocence, to gather evidence, and having gathered evidence to then make a case that is or is not sustained by the Crown Prosecution Service. And if an offence was committed and the evidence was there, I can't see, it's not even a question of zero tolerance, that is the law of the land.
Okay, thank you. Another question down the front here.
Thank you. Dr. Andrew Mayers, a mental health practitioner in Dorset, specialising in mental health advocacy and so forth. Shall I change the question? Because we're revisiting the mental health, and I'll ask Martyn these things. What will you do to ensure that appropriate action in the event of a public mental health incident, and to ensure the police have better understanding about how mental illness might present, and to ensure that the police have their own mental health protected?
Okay, we know that the blue light services deal with people who are mentally ill all the time. 50% of people who set deliberate arsons are mentally ill. We know that 80% of people in prison are mentally ill, and according to our own statistics, over 50% of people going through Dorset police cell blocks have some form of mental related issue or illness. So we have to get better at this. I have been doing an awful lot in this arena, but we're not there yet, as Pat said earlier. I've introduced training for frontline police officers. That training is done by the street triage team, by Bournemouth University, and by my mental health champion. We have a mental health champion in Dorset Police who works for me and for the Chief Constable. That, I think, is raising awareness of what police officers are dealing with when they deal with the issues, and we have a street triage scheme which you've heard about, which actually means that police officers have access to care plans so they can look after people in crisis. The next part of the question was, how would I look after police officers? We have signed a Blue Light Pledge, which is in concert with the charity Mind, that is looking after police officers and their mental health, and saying it's okay to say you have a lived experience, and it's okay to say to your supervisor, I don't feel very well. I filmed that video nationally. If you go to the Blue Light Pledge, you'll see me talking about my lived experience of mental health, and saying it's okay to have a mental health issue. We have to get rid of the stigma. When it comes to officers, we've also introduced a trim system, and we have also this week signed up to the 8-part pledge, which is if an officer is assaulted, we can get them back to work in a structured way and get them compensation for their injuries, because some of the injuries to police officers aren't just physical, they're mental as well. Have we finished the journey? No. Do we need to roll the street triage, liaison diversion, and the appropriate adult schemes together? Yes, we do. I'm working with government. Dorset's hopefully going to be one of the 4 areas in the country to pilot a rolled out, wraparound service for mental health and policing. And that means that appropriate adults, street triage, mental health professionals, and liaison diversion scheme professionals all work together in the same building, because they're often dealing with the same client group. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Lawrence Williams. I'm the Ward Councillor for Littledown. Now you might ask why I'm asking a question, but this school is one of 6 schools in Littledown, and we had 3 years ago, when you were elected, 2 policemen on the beat and a couple of PCSOs. Today we have 1 policeman that we share with Boscombe and Southbourne, and 1 PCSO. Now, the schools have challenges in this area, and we have difficulty in getting a police officer to the schools and indeed to the residents. Are you going to put the police back to where they were on the streets 3 years ago when you took over? You have a large staff. You could cut the staff back and put police in instead of that one.
Okay, so the reason the officer numbers have gone down is because of your government. Lawrence, you know that, so let's talk about that one. We lost the 5th class police officers because of you and your team, so with Dodgy Day, thanks for that. Actually, will I put them back? I will put some back if I recruit more police officers, but I won't put them all back. You know why? Because I've already talked about it, and so has Andrew. Some of the policing issues that have come over the horizon the last 3 years are not being completed on the streets, they're happening inside houses. We had the elderly being attacked, they're very vulnerable. We have the children, I've told you already, we've got a fourfold increase in child sexual exploitation happening. We have cybercrime which is happening in people's houses. You cannot put police officers back on the street if people are being attacked inside their houses and don't realise it. So will I put the numbers back to what your government took away? No. Will I try and put some of them back? Yes, I will. In your speech, you were very disingenuous. I have protected all PCSOs in Dorset. When I got elected, we had 156. We've still got 156. There are only 5 police crime commissioners in this country that can say that. I will recruit more officers. I've already made that pledge. Will I put them back on the street? That depends where the crime is. And that is not going to be a guarantee for me that we will increase your policing numbers. What I will say to you is, I've increased the size of the Safe School Community Team, which the SSCT who are inside schools, and we have now introduced a triage system where the Safe School Community Team are taking reports of bullying and cybercrime against children and dealing with it inside the schools. I think we're getting better at it, and I will do everything in my power to increase that. Thank you.
I'm going to come down the middle here. Question.
I have autism. My name is Lydia Livingston. I do live in the Boscombe area, and I admit I don't know much in this particular area I'm about to say. But you talk about engagement, and I think that's very important. I think you can do that from a forum point of view. But what's really missing is the one word, pact. Police and communities together. Where is that word anymore? I have no idea. I would ask any of you lot, if you want to be commissioner, bring back pact, because you need it. Even if it's once a year, bring it back.
So, should we put that to Patric?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, let's do it. I probably wouldn't get any disagreement, I don't think. I mean, what's a bit confusing is that it's still there in some places, but absolutely non-existent anywhere else. So we've got to recreate that structure, and it's about putting the resources in to do that. But yeah, it's critical because it's a way of the point, it's a way of meeting the point that's been raised a couple of times before about bringing agencies and people and communities together.
Just to finish on that, I totally get that. The issue is, it isn't a policing issue. Although it's policing communities together, it's community driven. What you found, particularly in Dorset, is that pacts have stopped because the local authorities brought in these forums, which are really good actually. I've got no problem with this forum approach. But that means that pacts have disappeared. North Dorset pacts have disappeared. They have community forums there. In Weymouth, pacts still happen. So you have disparate pacts across the county. It is a new challenge, and I've got to say, as Police Crime Commissioner, I've been trying to bring pacts back, but you have to have everybody on board, including the community and your partners. And that isn't the case across the county.
The Martyn's opened up the question there. Do any of the other candidates want to answer to you? Okay. We agree. Okay, great. Let's
yeah, it's all about community involvement, and any way we can drive that forward has got to be a good thing.
Okay, thank you. Sit up the side here. Have a second.
Good evening. I'd like to ask Martyn Underhill and perhaps one of the other candidates what they consider the problems or pitfalls associated with a party-affiliated crime commissioner as against an independent, and possibly what the benefits might be.
I'll enjoy this one. Okay, I've stood here several times to try and illustrate this point. I work well with government. I've got massive respect for Theresa May. I've just lost half the votes in the room. But you know what? She actually is driving forward mental health, human slavery, and various other issues that I respect her for. And I've worked well with Theresa. I've done several working groups with her. The National Concordat for Mental Health, I signed up with her. She works with me on taser and the use of force. We've changed the whole practice across the country in recording police force. Me and Theresa May. So I get on well with the Home Secretary. Do I get on well with the Conservatives? No, I don't all the time. I challenge them over everything. And I challenge this council, actually, I take support Patric. This council's approach, Lawrence's approach to the homeless is disgusting. We have got to get better looking after our homeless. They're doubled in Bournemouth because the overnight and the local connection policy is not good enough. So that's why I'm here. I can work with the Home Secretary, I can have a cup of tea with her. I shook her hand the other day, but I can challenge them as well. These people can't. They're tied to their party. Their deposits come from their party. They are political masters of these people.
Oh, I've got to come back on that one, haven't I? As a UKIP candidate, we do not run a party whip system. You may have seen that in operation. Now, what that means is that I've got the freedom to act in the same way that an independent does for the safety of Dorset, and that's what I will do. No one is going to come up to me from the party and tell me what to say or what to think. I will do as I see fit, talking to the people of Dorset. Now, the next thing is, though, that I do have behind me the power of the party that forced the in-out referendum. And we can do it again with other things, such as police funding. I've already talked to my colleagues who are pushing their own campaigns across the country, and they are all thinking exactly the same thing. If we get in as a group, we will be taking the battle as a group to Westminster to try and reverse this dreadful funding cuts on the police.
Politics out of policing, a lot of people think that means that the police are political. Let's be quite clear, the police should be and will be and ought to be impartial and not bound to any political party. That's the police. Anyone who says that the PCC is not a politician is missing the point. If you are elected, and Martyn would say this himself, by 700 and an electorate of nearly 800,000 people, and if you are spending a significant amount of money, which no other MP or anybody else elected does, on your own account, on behalf of those who've elected you, and they come from all communities. Once you are in, you are a Dorset politician. You are not necessarily totally bound by what comes down from on high, and I can assure you that what comes from on high in central government, challenged by Martyn, should be challenged by any police and crime commissioner. It would actually be obnoxious to suggest that somehow one was elected by Dorset and not prepared to speak truth to what is the broader sense of power. Because up there doesn't necessarily understand Dorset. In fact, it almost certainly doesn't understand much of what goes on. So challenging them is important. Making a case, whether it's a business case for merger or a fire service or whatever it may be, is fine. Challenging policies is exactly what any of us ought to be able to do. However, conservative principles, which is where I get up to, and 37 years in the army, totally apolitical, and no one should ever challenge me on being political. Conservative principles, I think some people might find rather easier to understand. First, we want a small government rather than large, and local decisions taken locally against local priorities, against the needs of local people, is what one really needs. Second, citizens have rights, of course they do, but they also have responsibilities. Third, spending public money effectively and efficiently is something that everyone wants done. And last of all, security and the rule of law, it really matters.
We know that the biggest single factor that determines the shape of the police force, determines the money, determines the political direction, is the nature of the political party that is in government at the time. You change that through a democratic process, and it's only through the democratic process by having representatives in the House of Commons that you are able to change the political direction of this country. That's the way the democratic process works. So being a member of the Labour Party, it probably has its influence in Dorset, but it doesn't have necessarily its influence anywhere else. It's part of a political process. And without that political process, we're never going to make any kind of change. But let's be clear, the whip system for police and crime commissioners does not exist. And it does not exist for very specific reasons. Firstly, any police and crime commissioner who's elected has to sign an oath of impartiality, which requires them to operate impartially and not in accordance with party dogma. Secondly, as a member of the Labour, over and above that, as a member of the Labour Party and as a Labour Party candidate, I have actually signed a contract with the party which requires me to protect police operational independence. So there's two things which prevent the the whip system from actually happening. But it isn't to say that I'm pretending not to be a member of the Labour Party, pretending not to have those aims and values of the party. If I stood as an independent, nobody would believe me. I've been a member of the Labour Party for 45 years. It's part of what I am, it's part of what I believe. So you can't escape it. One final point. We have a Home Secretary at the moment who has said openly in a letter that the only way of the communities being able to ensure a good service is by electing a Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner. Well on record as saying that. And that independent police and crime commissioners are not to be trusted. This is in a letter from Theresa May. We have a situation now where this government has made policing partisan. It has made it a party political background. So don't lecture me or don't ask me to defend an involvement about politics in policing, because the government have made it political.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're adjusting that to keep the camera on. Question, I've got a hand raised over here.
Thank you. My name is Mr. Frank Howell. I'm a local resident. The issue I wanted to ask, I would be interested in response from all four candidates, if possible, is to do with the drug issue that affects Boscombe in particular, but obviously the national issue as well. We've had another report recently, questioning the problems of almost everything about drugs is to criminalise it, and is this the best way forward? Are there other ways of dealing with drugs, drug abuse, drug use, that in our community may be much more effective at actually tackling the problem? And clearly I would have thought this would be an issue that the Police and Crime Commissioner would be involved with.
Thank you. So that's, who's standing up first? That's all we said.
Clearly the criminalisation of drugs is an issue, and one ought to be engaged with it, but it is a matter for the legislature, for those who make the laws of the country to deal with, and for the police to then police the law as it is. Whatever my personal views may be, as I've just been saying, you're elected by the electorate, and you need to reflect the views of those that have elected you. On the other hand, engaging properly in the debate that allows us to lead to better prevention of crime, reduce the risk of criminalisation of individuals, but backed with education, rehabilitation and other things, then there is clearly a discussion and a debate to be had, and that debate needs to be had. But selective quoting of data, which some people are slightly prone to do, witness Robert De Niro talking about the MMR vaccine, a film star kind of commenting on a strictly medical issue, is not always the answer. It's quite easy to take wave-top assertions without looking at the whole picture. So yes, the debate, if it needs to happen, certainly needs to happen, and the Police and Crime Commissioner will be involved, but ultimately it becomes a matter for the law of the country, and the police must police the law as it is. That's their responsibility.
Wholeheartedly agree with that. It is the legislature that makes these laws, and it is up to the executive to then carry out the instructions of the legislature in the way, and they have to obey it. In fact, if we took selective means of just saying, oh, because I believe differently, I'm going to do differently, then it puts me in a position, any one of us in a position of danger. So we just have to follow the law as it is written. We can have input into it, and look at the studies and have a recommendation, all that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we have to follow what the law is.
I would have to split your point into two bits. There's the legislative structure, which is, for the government to decide as a result of the election, and we all probably have views about the way in which the legislation around drugs is structured. But the other issue is about the way in which it's policed. And the Police and Crime Commissioner in Durham got himself into a little bit of hot water a while ago by saying to the Chief Constable, look, we can't spend all of these resources chasing people for possession of small amount of drugs. Incredibly controversial. But it is an issue. How many, what kind of resources do you put about chasing small amounts of possession rather than, or instead of, chasing who's supplying it, who's bringing it into the country in the first place, who's growing it in their, in their greenhouse in the back garden. Those are the issues. So it's about ensuring that the police work sensibly, that they use their resources in a way which is most effective to tackle the problem, and also to ensure that the people who are in a position where they need support because they've acquired an addiction get the help to get them off.
The war on drugs isn't working. Pat has just said that the PCC from Durham got himself in hot water. Actually, 3 of us did. If you do a Google search, 3 PCCs have asked for a national debate on drugs laws. One is Ron Hobb from Durham, the other is Alan Charles from Derby, and the third is me. I believe the war on drugs is not working. What we have found in 100 years of drug enforcement is that prohibition of drug does not stop the supply of drugs, but it does line the pockets of organised criminals. That's the first one. The second point is that the criminalisation of drugs criminalises the user and not the drug, and that can't be right. And rather like prohibition in America with alcohol, which didn't work, I believe that prohibition of drugs doesn't work. The war on drugs needs a new debate. I haven't got the answer. I'm not standing here saying I have got the answer. The Liberal Democrats will tell you they've got the answer. They want to legalise drugs. I'm not saying we should legalise drugs. There are various ways of dealing with it, one of which I think is probably the best way, is to actually look at it as a health issue. A heroin addict is a victim. A heroin addict is somebody suffering from a health-related illness. We deal with alcoholics as a health issue. Why don't we deal with drugs as a health issue? So I welcome the debate on drugs. I have lobbied the government to have a debate on drugs. Norman Baker, who was the Crime Prevention Minister, agreed with me. He left that role. I have met the current policing minister. He refuses to move his position at all on the war on drugs. And I'm really interested, and I praise Andrew for his comments, because his party don't share that view. The Conservative Party nationally, the policing minister nationally, the Home Secretary nationally are saying we're not moving our position on drugs. It isn't working, ladies and gentlemen. We need a change.
First-hand accounts of how people have been accosted by private security companies in the street, not just in Boscombe but across the area. So my question to you is, in the light of the Conservatives' tendency to privatise things, so initially it's directly with also all of you, what are your views on private security companies being used in conjunction with the police force? Because in these 3 situations, the people that spoke to me felt like these people were acting as or like police officers and were intimidated because of that. So first of all, what are your views on that? And secondly, do you have any affiliations or shares in or, Masonic handshakes with private security companies? So twofold. Thank you.
Yeah, now me getting that low ball of it. I think what you're talking about, madam, I don't know your name, sorry. Lizzie, I think you're talking about the Community Safety Accredited Scheme, CSAS, which is a private company who are licensed by the Chief Constable.
So, well, actually, the situation that I'm talking about is that the G4S, they were doing it. So it's a private security company, nothing as I'm aware to do with police.
Oh, okay.
But they had come across to these individuals like they were enforcing the law and intimidated them and not been, in my view, and I'm pretty sure in the legal view, correct.
Okay.
And so it's that interpretation of where private security firms come into play.
Okay, so I'm not aware of this issue. I'm aware of the CSAT scheme, which I have helped part fund. That is a specific issue which looks at a specific area of Boscombe Sovereign Centre, which actually has helped reduce antisocial behaviour, so I support that. I wouldn't call that privatisation of policing. But the G4S thing you're talking about has confused me. I want to see if the other candidates know more than me.
I think there's a litter patrol, another council called litter patrol.
Oh, is it the council litter patrol?
And I think someone's come through the forum saying that they...
I'm looking at local councils. It is the litter patrol, is it? Right, well, you taught me something tonight.
On the council, not police.
Right, so this is a council-led initiative, not police-led initiative. I didn't even know about it. So there you go, you can't have things as police crime commissioner.
They've got that law enforcing tendency, so yeah, I'm just curious about your opinion and if you have any kind of connections with
Okay, my opinion is, I said at the beginning, I don't agree with privatising police forces, and I don't agree with outsourcing unless there's a really good reason. And you know why? Two things. If you outsource policing, and Lincolnshire's done it, 80% of Lincolnshire police is now outsourced, you have no future-proofing if there are cuts. So Lincolnshire pays 20% of cuts, they'd outsource 80% of their work, they couldn't pay the bills. That's why they ended up in London saying to the Home Secretary, we need help. So I don't believe in outsourcing because it's not future-proof and it isn't flexible enough. I certainly don't agree with privatisation. I will never agree to privatisation of the police force. That is very much a business-led initiative, it's a conservative-led initiative, frankly, and I don't agree with it. Have I got any connections to private companies? No, I haven't. I am a Mason, I've already declared that, but that doesn't actually impact on this question. I have outsourced one thing as Police Crime Commissioner in 3 years, and that is scene guards. We used to have police officers or PCSOs being paid a lot of money to guard a scene, particularly in rural areas, we're a rural county, and it didn't make sense. And we went to a security company, we're paying them half the wage, and they guard the scene for us, and we have one police officer there or PCSO instead of 6. So that's the only thing I've outsourced as Police Crime Commissioner. I'm actually against privatisation and outsourcing unless it saves money and improves efficiency. And my experience, even in the Strategic Alliance, is that that doesn't work very well, which is why I haven't done it.
Well, you probably wouldn't be surprised as a Labour Party candidate if I said I'm opposed to all privatisation and all outsourcing. And no, I don't have any shares or dealings with property companies, and no, I'm not a Mason. I wouldn't be allowed to stand as a candidate if I was a Mason. The key thing, I think, about the point you raised is...
Can I just ask why you could stand if you're a Mason?
Sorry?
You said you couldn't stand if you're a Mason.
It's against the rules of the Labour Party.
I see,
thank you. So the point I think about behind the question is, where are the pressures going to come? And the pressure through the cuts is going to come on the policing, and although Dorset has resisted it so far, there is going to come a point when there are big question marks over whether or not we can keep all of those services in-house. My commitment is to do that.
Outsourcing, privatisation, no. That's the simple answer to that one. And I find it surprising that we've got employees who are going around being a bit heavy-handed. That sounds like really there should only be warranted officers doing things like that, being that heavy-handed. I just totally find that a bit sort of gobsmacking. I personally, I'm not a member of the Masons. I have no offshore hedge funds, no massive amounts of dodgy dealings in we're looking for it in the Bahamas or anywhere like that. And I must also declare that sadly I've got no onshore large amounts of money either.
I'm not a Freemason, I am a Scotsman, I suppose that's damning in some quarters, really. But anyway, I've lived in Dorset for 17 years, so I'm sort of across the border and across the divide, I think. In terms of the issue, I think they're acting beyond their remit, and that needs to be, they need to have their range pretty hard, because that's not what they're there for. And in terms of the issue, I think sometimes people use it's all privatisation or whatever's the other word used, outsourcing, which are sort of capital letter words, which I've never really liked. I've got experience in the military, and the military is a very specific trade. We're working with civilian companies, but very clearly who was in charge worked extremely well to deliver good effect. And I ran the Army Recruiting and Training Division, 10,000 mixed military, civilian, contractor and other services, and we produced extremely good people ready to go on the front line and do the job directly and straight away. But it was very clear who was in charge and what we were trying to achieve. And companies that didn't measure up to what we were trying to achieve were on their way. That's not outsourcing, that's working collaboratively to get better effect and more from the pounds that you've got, provided you focus on outcome and effect and not just on numbers.
Thank you very much. Just to make a point on the heavy-handed litter patrols in Boscombe, because we've actually had some complaints to the forum on that tip as well. As a witness to the Boscombe Regeneration Partnership meeting a couple of weeks ago, the council are aware. They are asking for people to have any circumstances or any experience of this heavy-handedness and report it back to them, and they will take action and ensure that there's a nicer, more amenable.
We do want the litter picked, don't we? We don't want the litter dropped.
Yeah.
So, you know, do what you've got to do.
My name is David Ross. My question is mainly directed to the Lieutenant General. So you come across as plausible, I agree. I wonder whether you have a very different character from Martyn, because your excellent career and training is as a leader of men. Does that mean that you see the role of PCC as a leadership role or a hands-on role?
I see. I'm very, very clear that the Chief Constable is the professional voice of policing in policing, and that the PCC is the voice of the community, of the people of Dorset, the electorate in policing. Strike back to my last 36 years, I would have been very cross if someone had told me how to soldier, but I would have expected them to say what impact and effect they wanted me to achieve, and that's particularly clear in Northern Ireland, working alongside the police there. So in terms of if leadership role is about setting broad direction and a course of travel, a plan out to the 4 years, the allocation of resources and ingenious thinking, working with the Chief Constable and others to achieve a 4-year plan, which is what we're talking about, then it's a leadership role. Is it an operational role? No, that is the Chief Constable's responsibility. And I would expect to have my own string jerked by the electorate and be reminded by the Chief Constable if I was stepping into her area.
Thomas Midgley nearly wiped out life on this planet, and the way we're going about things, sadly, our oxygen, I'm afraid, nearly went. Somebody was paying attention, it wasn't matter. But we're going everything about it the same way, because we are wiping out life on our planet, as we know, and Patric cases and so on. Climate migrations are going to come on us quick and fast, and the question is, because we do need low-carbon jobs which aren't being put into place or secured. Given the warnings of the 2008 report by the Oxford Research Group, An Uncertain Future, Law Enforcement, National Security and Climate Change, how would you respond to the conclusion that the risks of climate change demand a rethink of approaches to security, civil unrest, scarcity, as well as movements of people, and how will you protect us? And as an addition to that, we do need people to be happy in low-carbon jobs, because that would solve a lot of crime. Okay, thank you.
Any candidate willing to... that's a bit of a minefield too.
Thank you. Really interesting. On Tuesday evening, I was having supper with the climate change representative from the Foreign Office, who spent the last 6 years looking at climate change security and the security implications of those sort of things, shortfalls of resources and over-reliance on fossil fuels and. The tedious thing about his 6 years working there is they haven't yet got any answers, but at least people are thinking about it. And the point is to stay engaged and to look forward, that horizon scanning, that broad understanding of the sort of issues that may be coming down the track, while then allowing the Chief Constable to be getting on with doing the policing day to day and thereon. So I think there is a role, not necessarily for an individual PCC, but perhaps for the organisation of PCCs, working and looking just more broadly, because it's what's going to come in 2, 3, 5, 7 years' time that we need to be preparing ourselves for now. So I absolutely agree with you. Don't have an answer, sadly, nor did he.
I'd just like to come in on that. Obviously, as the incumbent, it's never been discussed in that PCC. It's a really interesting point. It has been discussed in government, and that's what Andrew was just saying. But what you've asked is, it's such a huge question. And to be fair, it needs to be led by government. Let's bring it back to local. I get some of your points you made. I am trying to be green as police fire commissioner. We are bringing in battery-operated cars, for example, and we now have solar panels on top of police stations. So, tiny little effort, but still trying to move in the right direction. You're right, it's a good point. As Andrew said, I think this government needs to give us a steer on this, and they're not ready for it.
I mean, there's got to be some cost incentive as well, isn't there, to go green?
It is actually a global problem. It's a global thing. Now, global warming, or whatever you want to call it, climate change, is happening, and it's been happening for millions and millions of years and will continue to happen.
No,
Whoever,
science is right there. Sorry.
well, we've had ups and downs of all sorts of temperatures.
400 parts per million now, 5 years. How many million years has there been? You know this?
Yes.
I'm sorry, because I have science denial in here.
No, I'm not denying science, but we've had ice ages. Have we had an ice age? Yes, we've had ice ages, and we've had warmer periods. So, sorry, the temperature of the world has gone up and down, and it will continue to do so. Whatever the cause is, whether it's man-made or not, it will have an impact on, as you say, on migration, on where people want to go and how they want to live, and all the rest of it. So it is an important question, but it isn't, as has been said, anything that PCCs can do directly within a 4-year term. This is going to be done on a global scale with national governments acting together to do that. It's not going to be
global, act local.
Okay, Patric, have you got anything to say on the environment?
No, I don't think I can add a great deal to it. The key for me is how does the PCC or groups of PCC begin to make some kind of contribution towards the important point that you've raised? Well, there are practical things they can do in terms of reducing carbon emissions and all of that kind of stuff. But the other thing I think that the police and crime commissions can do, and we individually through our different mechanisms can do, is to change the dialogue, because we're not talking enough about it. I just whispered to Martyn after the PCC discussed it, and he said no. Well, it would be a good start to get them to, wouldn't it? And it's not criticism. It's just it's just true. We're not talking about this stuff nearly enough, and not just about protecting the environment, but it is about the effect on human beings. It's changing the nature of the way in which people live, and that has societal consequences, and it also has consequences for law and order in particular countries and the movement of people from one country to another. Some of that is driven by climate. So unless we respond to that, and points already been made, we have to do it internationally. But unless we begin to tackle the problem and start talking about the problem and how we might be able to tackle it, then we're not going to be able to take that big step forward that I think we need to.
Yeah, thank you. Massive security issue dealing with the environment. It's coming at us hard and fast. So, future is hopeful.
Hi, a couple of things. Firstly, what is the Police and Crime Commissioner going to do about the massive theft that happens all the time by Bournemouth Council when groups cannot get the fundings that is allocated for them because it gets used out of office at other places? And secondly, if anybody is going to go and vote, please take your own black ink pen, because the governments and all of the polling stations seem to provide a pencil. Now, to my knowledge, whenever you have to fill in anything official, it has to be in black ink. So please take a black ink pen with you, and you can sit and smile all you like. I think about the people, I think about the bigger picture, not myself. Thank you.
Is there a question that actually I'm trying to
Yeah, okay. It was priceless to watch these faces here. As Police and Crime Commissioner, I'm going to say to you last night, or as a candidate, I'm going to say to you, if you're saying that the council are committing a crime, you need to report it. The police will investigate it. The end of your question was suggesting that they weren't allocating grants to you, to be fair. The council can decide who they give grants to and reduce those grants. I know that. I've got a charity, they fund them, but they reduced it this year because of the cuts. I can't argue with that, and I support them for what they've done over the years in supporting my charity. So I don't know what else to say with it. The second bit, Black Boy, Walker Camp, no shit, thank
you. If you don't like what Bournemouth Council don't do, and I don't, change them. That's what we've got to do, and we have to act collectively to change them. We have a one-party state effectively in at the moment, and we have to do something about that because it's not democratic. Even more importantly than not being democratic, it's not representational.
Yeah, if the council does something illegal, it should be held to account. But I don't know anything about what you're saying. So if you want to come and talk to us separately afterwards, maybe we could find out a bit more. What's the second part? Oh, the black pen. Oh, right, yeah. I just thought of it. I've attended several elections, like a couple of my people here. So we've got into the counts, we see the boxes and all the rest of it, and it's all very well done. And everything seems to be, I don't think anybody's going to be rubbing out pennies on the balance sheet, putting them on board, replacing them. The only criticism I would have about the system is that the ballot boxes are sealed with ordinary tie wraps, it seems, just ordinary things you get in the supermarket. I would just like them to use the official numbered, identifiable tags to seal the boxes before they're sent out into the polling station.
So why do they provide a pencil then?
Because you can mark the pencil on a piece of on it, it's cheaper.
That's sufficient, isn't it? Because I need
Yes.
official documentation, it has to be like
No.
anybody that's still got a mortgage or a loan or
Okay, thank you. I think you made this point. Thank you.
That's fine.
Andrew, just as a matter of interest, there's a Bitcoin technology now means that will come in the next few years, I'm sure of it, which will then basically guarantee votes will be done electronically and securely. So there'll be a day when pencil won't matter and we'll it does for now, yeah. So a last couple of questions, I think, to the end of the night before we hear the roundup from each of the candidates. I'm going to go to my Vice Chair, Mark. Yes? Question? Thanks, Mark.
Hi, I'm aware that we now have a female police chief constable, but may I just respectfully say that as we have a white male of a certain age candidate panel, do you have any policies regarding the employment of women within your office and indeed opportunities within Dorset Police? Are you aware of any initiatives that will ensure a more representative face of policing? Thank you.
Good question, Mark.
I presume everyone's going to answer this. Obviously, the independent, I'm gutted by the independent representation in this election. It's lower than last time, and it's nearly all white man. I get that. The problem is, with independent, you can't really define who stands. I'll leave the three candidates to talk about their party policy. The point about the office is really good. Over 50% of my office is female. I also employ disabled staff. And I also have a dementia-friendly office as well. All my staff are trained in dementia. So I'm really proud of that, and I'm very big on equality and diversity, and I am Vice Chair of Forum 3, which is the gay charity. So it's very much on my radar, and I think it's a really good question.
Excuse me, are you aware of any initiatives in the police forces?
Yes, there are. We have equality champions. We have 6 equality champions, 1 for each strand. We've added another one now for the elderly. We have diversity training for all the officers. We have quite a big out gay team in the police now. So I think we're getting there. The big debate, which has been had nationally for 10 years, is do you actually make the recruitment look at the BME community? The police have tried everything except for enforcing it in law, and the government and the chief constables are saying they don't agree with that. I can understand why they're saying that. It is a big issue. In Dorset we have 6% BME population, and in the police I think it's 3%, so it is lower than the representation of the community it represents. But how do you get around that? The debate's gone on for 10 years. If you can't attract the right people, how do you go to make that happen? It's really difficult.
Sorry to rush this answer, because that's a very, very interesting topic, but we'll come to the end of the year and I said to let the other candidates speak.
I mean, it's a really important point, because not only are we poor white men of a certain age, we saw Sunday politics the other week for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, 7 white men of a certain age. And certainly in 2012, the Labour Party, just looking at it from a kind of internal point of view, we had many more women. So we are asking ourselves, well, why? Why did we attract so fewer people who are putting themselves forward for this role? We have got a big job of work to do. Part of it is the nature of the role itself. We have to make it more accessible to women. And we also have to make sure the police force is as representative as possible in terms of the proportion of the black and minority ethnic population. So we have to ensure that. One of the things that we've been doing is try and get to a point where we've got 50-50 representation in Westminster between men and women. We're not, we're a long way from that. And the only way we are going to be able to achieve that is by trying to attract more people. And it is about trying to ensure that we make it as easy as possible for whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your background, to come forward and put your name forward for this role.
For me, it comes back down to the community policing sort of thing. If you want people from every area in society, the best from every area in society to come forward and wear the uniform, then that uniform has got to be out in amongst those communities all the time and showing that actually we're just like everybody else. They're just like everybody else. Come and join and be part of it. You can't do that if you're behind a wall, or you're not, you're behind just on the telephone. You've got to talk to people face to face. You've got time to engage. And that to me is a very, very important part of this. And that's the way you'll do that. But we do need to see the best of all communities and all genders, or whatever you want to call it, represented in the police. That's the only way that it can act for everybody in society.
Discrimination of any kind is absolutely abhorrent and should not be tolerated, and I wouldn't do that. Martyn has made the point. I ran a little expedition company. It was all up hills, down dales, right away and everywhere else, and it was 8 females and 4 lads. And that was exactly as it should be, and they were far better at it than the boys, actually, in many cases, which was brilliant. In terms of within the police and opportunities there, I think it's a little bit back to narrative, questions about the opportunities and the openness and the personal development and investment that will be made in individuals, because I think that will start to attract people. There are quality people in the police. We should be investing in them and encouraging that. So that starts to send a message. This is a place worth being and a job worth doing, as well as a place that is congenial to whatever I am, from wherever I come from, and whatever my background, whatever anything else, because as I said, discrimination is abhorrent. In terms of BCCs, yes, but the candidates are, and if people don't come forward, you're a bit stuck. You shouldn't be, there's no room for a pressed woman, actually, in this. And one of the best and most respected, I'm sure Martyn will agree, PCCs of the lot, Vera Bird up in Northumbria, is fantastic. But she had a very, very successful previous track record as an ex-Labour Party Attorney General. So there's an issue there, isn't there, of having done something elsewhere and feeling, perhaps, that the nature and scale of the role. It's very new. People don't really know about it. Perhaps part of the problem is going to be by pushing ever more possibilities of responsibility down. It seems to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more out of reach. And maybe that is a difficult narrative area for the future. I'm too new to it to be able to have an opinion on that.
Thank you. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're very tight for time. We've got one more question from the floor, and then I think what we'll do is if we ask the question, put it to candidates, and then kind of you can segue your answer into your kind of roundup, and then that'll be it for the evening. So one more question, and that's.
I heard on the news the other day that people smuggling gangs are targeting weaker ports, and there's an area of extensive coastline and lots of access points. And in light of the police cuts, what will be done with regards to that and the threat of terrorism that Martyn raised, I think, in the newspapers several months ago?
Thank you. Yeah, fine.
Okay, so I've been very vocal about this issue and actually demonstrates what I was saying about being an independent. I work well with the government. I've successfully lobbied for lots of things with people at Dorset: firearms fees, taxi deregulation, mental health, I've already mentioned, action fraud, and the use of force. But the one thing that Theresa May and I are head on over is our port security. And if you read the front page of the Telegraph week last Saturday, I was quoted in saying that when the inevitable happens, which is going to be a terrorist attack in London or Birmingham, the Home Secretary and her government will not survive the fallout. The security of our ports, the small ports in Dorset, is a scandal. They have reduced the numbers day in, day out. If you looked at the parliamentary questions yesterday, the Labour Party was saying that they finally got the Home Secretary to admit yesterday 6% year-on-year cuts to the border force. When the police professionals, if you read the Times yesterday, I think it's the Telegraph, all of the police professionals and all of the security experts in this country are saying you need to increase it by fourfold, not cut it by 6%. This government have got their security of the borders wrong. This isn't a Brexit issue, it's about security of our country. I know that illegal refugees are coming in through Poole and through Weymouth all the time. I know, I've been told that by the staff who work there. People are seeing people come off the back of lorries as the lorries go over the bridges of the port. That cannot be right. And because they've got better at the security of the main ports, they're coming in through our small ports. And we know 1.82 million people are in Europe at the moment who are unaccounted for. They came across the eastern borders from Turkey, Croatia and Hungary. Some of those people are terrorists. Some of those people are going to come into this country, and we are going to suffer a catastrophic attack because this government will not deal with our border security. Now,
we have the round.
To finish, sorry, I've got a 1-minute speech. I've just told you about my lobbying successes. What I will say to you as an independent, I can work with the government and I can also challenge the government. Since 2012, ladies and gentlemen, across Dorset, antisocial behaviour is down, vehicle crime is down, burglary is down, PCSO numbers have been preserved by me. Set Street working in this area is down. We have a new police hub at the Argus building and we have a new police box. And I, despite my playful banter tonight with this gang here, including the Dodgy Day comments, I work well with Ward Council. We have worked well together on housing and social behaviour, drugs and alcohol. You have to be able to work with partners to make a difference in Boscombe, and I believe I've done that. I think I made a difference in Boscombe. I think I made a difference in Dorset. Now, I like Leicester and Pat, but the likelihood is, ladies and gentlemen, this is a two-horse race. This is David versus Goliath. I am the underdog, again. I was last time. Before you tick that Conservative box, just think about this. We already have a blue Zoon army across this county. Parish councils, town councils, district councils, county councils, unitary authorities, and 8 out of 8 MPs are all Conservative. This whole county is blue. That's bad for policing and bad for democracy. May the 5th is Independence Day. Vote Underhill. Thank you.
Well, I obviously agree with Martyn about the too much blue in Dorset. We're not going to disagree about that. But I'm going to be through the joking about David versus Goliath, because if anybody thinks this is a level playing field, it's a joke. Martyn has got £30,000 from an independent company, perfectly entitled to give them that money. But let's not pretend that any of the other answers, especially me, have got access to those kind of resources. This isn't a level playing field. This is an issue about people who have been able to use public money to promote themselves for the last 4 years. And the issue for me is about ensuring that we have a situation where it's you, as a member of the public, that have an advocate who will work and act for you. Now, one of the most important things I want to say this evening is about the importance of voting. There are question marks all of the time about the legitimacy of the election last time because it was so low. We are only going to change that if you vote, if you persuade the people that you know to vote, and that we increase the level of participation in this election. Because the next one will be in 2020, and that will be a general election. So we're going to have this job, this role for at least 8 years. So participating in it is absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Patric. Patric, Canavan. Sorry, just so the timer is for 2 minutes, but you've only got a minute, so...
That was quickly said already. As a UKIP candidate, as I said, I am not tied down to what anyone is going to say to me. I'm going to actually keep Dorset safe, but I'm going to use the power of the party to get the funding we need. All you've heard tonight is everything is about cuts coming. We're going to see more cuts. In fact, I don't think that 22,000 police cuts that they were thinking about last November have gone away. I don't think that George Osborne has actually put them on the shelf forever. He's actually got them ready to dust off and reintroduce as soon as he can, and as soon as he thinks it's politically expedient, because his eye is on number 10. And as has been stated, I think that the Conservative Party, having too much power in Dorset, will actually just make it even worse. They'll just sign through the cuts, and they'll just aim to make an excuse for the cuts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll start on the all-blue point. Martyn's already paid me a compliment by saying on drugs, wasn't it amazing that I'd already broken apparently the party whip by being against whatever that policy was. Well, on the terms of border protection and so on, first question is to grip the data. The second is to decide whether it really is a Dorset cause and important enough to take up with central government, which I'm sure it will be. And the third is, of course, a change of Police and Crime Commission doesn't necessarily mean a change of direction. What Dorset wants remains. It's just the individual that changes. And so in that case, if it really is an issue, then all guns blazing. And a fair chance of being the grit in the oyster of the blue wheel and creating a pearl rather than the grit in the wheel, which is what an independent candidate who isn't off the cloth may be. You've described it, paid me a compliment to some extent, I think, damning with faint praise, to say I'm plausible. The question really is, am I credible, am I trustworthy, and do I have the experience for this job by virtue of what I've actually done on the ground and around and about. Martyn is immensely knowledgeable. He's produced a great deal of facts, and that's good, and I absolutely give him the credit for getting the job going. However, if you look at the police's own statistics, between September 2012 and September 2015, Bournemouth has steadfastly remained, against its comparators across the country, the third most crime-ridden per head of population of towns of its comparable size and thing. 1 Brighton and Hove and 2 Cambridge. I would like to end by quoting another good Labour politician, Dennis Healy. When you're in a hole, stop digging.
So, thank you all the candidates this evening. Hopefully you've all got a good idea. For those who weren't here, tell your friends and family, tell them all about the candidates, what your feelings are. The videos will go up online shortly, and check out our Facebook, Twitter, and all those things for the videos of all the candidates tonight. I've asked the candidates to stay behind for a little while afterwards. So if you've got any questions you'd like to ask them personally, I think they'll all be staying around for 10-20 minutes just to answer questions. Thank you all, and just draw your attention to what's our next public forum meeting. Anyone got the date? Boscombe Forum? It's not on my day. Look on our social networks and you'll find out. But it's next month. Thank you all for coming. Good night.